has given us everything that we need here on this earth to cure just about everything. But I wanted to give you a preface about things. So as I sit here and drink my mate, this is mate from Uruguay, and my cousin Kata made this beautiful mate. We call it mate too. It's usually a gourd, but the cup is called mate. The herb is called mate. Andrew Huberman talks about it all the time. I was reading a little bit about it for some of the stuff I was pulling together for the larger video. And one of the things that I saw was a guy kind of tongue-in-cheek talking about the 5 reasons why you shouldn't drink mate. And it was all the great reasons about mate. There's weight control. There's all kinds of things. But there are, constantly things like that going on. So I thought I'd mention that in the preface for my Nature is Medicine video, as I enjoy this in front of you. I had a friend of mine recently comment that I had mentioned nettle tea, which I'll discuss more in the video. And he said that he takes nettle tea and it doesn't do anything for his allergies because that's what it's very good at handling. And so I mentioned to him the pharmaceuticals are actually, the companies are doing more genetic testing, and they're starting to realize more and more that your genetics have a huge role to play in the way you metabolize anything, food, substances, whatever it is. So, there isn't a one size fits all for anything, not even with herbs, not with diet, not with anything. So when you're talking about herbs, and as I go through, there's very few things that we all need, like water, sunlight, and there's even people that are supposedly allergic to water, allergic to sunlight, or at least they have certain parameters they have to live within. So again, we kind of go back to that individualism that functional medicine and functional nutrition tries to get through to people. A lot of people feel like, just like Western medicine and pharmaceuticals, you take this pill for this thing that you're experiencing and this pill for that thing. And they want to kind of apply it the same way to herbs and natural living. But the truth is, like I said before, it doesn't work that way. And we have a ton of variety, even with respect to mate. I mean, that's just one tea. There's a lot of other green teas that work for different people. And I actually have never liked black tea, but I love coffee. And I would always have bad experiences with black tea. People would constantly say, no, you shouldn't drink coffee. You should switch to tea. Well, guess what? Turns out I'm sensitive to black tea, not to green tea, 2 different things. Because when you process things, it changes their molecular structure. So, people have asked me too about marijuana and what I think about that. It's an herb like any other herbs. Coca leaf tea is drunk all the time in the Andes because it helps them with the altitude and to keep energized while they're living and climbing in that area. But they don't refine it like sugar or cocaine, and they are having it in its natural form. And usually just like a hot water extraction, which if you look up in PubMed a lot, and I'll get into it in this other video, that is usually the best way to get any kind of compounds from the leaves. And there's a really beautiful scripture at Revelation 22:2, and it says, the leaves of the trees will be for the healing of the nations. And I think that is somewhat symbolic, but I think it's probably also very literal. I can't think of a single medicine that wasn't created from something in nature. Maybe, scorpion venom is something that's not a leaf, but definitely all of this abundance of different kinds of foliage, flowers, they all have medicinal properties that can help certain things. Some things don't work for some people and some things work for others. I just kind of wanted to bring that home before we start any of this, that in my IT days, we said this a lot. When people asked, will this work for me, or can I do this? And we would always say, it depends. And it does. it depends. I don't get a lot of use out of a particular brand and blend of a phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine. It's a brain booster. It's a supplement that I like to take upon occasion, but my son does. And then there's another blend, has the same ingredients, just a little bit of a different blend. And I get great results from that one, but my son does not. So it all depends. When you're talking about herbs, it all depends, just like food. Like you can get an apple that's mealy and nasty and not really, it's just not a good fruit, or maybe the entire tree is sick. And then you can get a wonderful apple from a very good source that has great soil, lots of nutrients in it. Still an apple, but your source is important. So those are the qualifiers that most scientific studies leave out, that you just can't compare apples to apples in this case, when you're not looking at all the distinct details and differences of how that apple was grown. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope it gives you some more information about how you can really harness nature to be able to heal yourself. Whenever I'm writing what I want to share with you guys, I seem to start with writer's block. My only way out is to go outside. It could be the extra vitamin D my body's producing by being in the sun, or maybe just the sound of the birds, or maybe the negative ions. Nevertheless, it always helps me focus. It's little wonder, because the body is intrinsically connected to sunlight. If you've never heard of grounding, basically just walking on the earth barefoot, or forest bathing, the basic idea is that ions from the ground pass into the body, greatly reducing or preventing inflammation. This is to the point that an 84-year-old diabetic patient was able to resolve a wound that wouldn't heal simply by grounding for about 8 months. For those not inclined to walk outside in the grass barefoot, leather-soled shoes will also do the trick, provided there's no other padding. Grounding has also been shown to reduce cortisol levels in the blood. Pretty amazing. Sunshine is critical for adequate levels of vitamin D, and 2 hours daily of sun exposure has been found to combat eye degeneration from blue light exposure, aka from staring at screens all day. Deficiency in vitamin D can cause elevation in blood sugar, leading to diabetes and high cortisol levels, which can as well. And speaking of hormones, there are those feel-good chemicals that you can activate just by doing certain things. The body, for example, uses oxytocin to help with digestion, concentration, emotional connections, and various other health-related necessities, including the release and management of trauma. If you've ever had a fight with a loved one or a friend, the natural inclination is to hug after apologies are given, which ends up in the release of oxytocin and makes you feel better. Because thought patterns and internal conflict can affect the body's ability to calm itself and heal, it's often encouraged that one, fake it till you make it, or in other words, do the behavior and the feelings will follow. Other ways to up the levels of oxytocin are helping others, or even spending time with animals. The act of petting an animal has been shown to even increase the oxytocin levels in the animal as well as the human. Many comedians are depressed, and that's likely due to them finding that laughter is good medicine for sadness. It's certainly true, as it stimulates the production of serotonin. Runners know that they will feel euphoric after their endorphins kick in. But did you know that tasting something sweet, even if it has 0 calories, also triggers the release of beta endorphins, a potent painkiller? This hormone is found to be deficient in women who are premenstrual, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, and also in people with low self-esteem. Dopamine hits are what you get scrolling through social media. It's the reward chemical, but you get a longer lasting dose of it every time you complete a task, like getting your dishes done. and repeatedly stimulated every time you look at that completed task having been done, making it a much more productive way to get it. The only trouble is that doing these things alone is not enough to make the hormones if you're deficient in the building blocks that make them, like vitamins, minerals, and amino acids. There's a discipline called balneology, or the treatment of diseases by bathing. Indeed, the trace minerals like calcium chloride, sodium, zinc, phosphate, nitrogen, silica, selenium, magnesium, lithium, sulfate, manganese, and boron in thermal waters are absorbed through the skin and aid the body in recovering from ailments. Most of these minerals are needed in small amounts, but are typically missing or at least very low in the diet. My grandma used to love going to the Hotel Termas de Arape, thermal waters of Arape in Uruguay. She swore it eased her pains and went regularly in her old age. If you can't get to thermal waters, though, you can make your own by purchasing trace minerals and taking them internally or adding them to your bath. If you can't get trace minerals, Epsom salt baths can really do a lot in helping you detox and get in the rest and digest mode. It's something I use a lot for Holden, especially when treating him with all of the issues that he was facing, the mold lately, and then the effects of his vaccines prior to that. Just to be sure that you're getting as much calcium as you need for the amount of magnesium that you add to the bath. That's the basic mineral in Epsom salt. These two, calcium and magnesium, need to stay at a 2-to-1 ratio in your body. So keep an eye on it. Going from a hot sauna or bath and into cold also releases endorphins in the brain, not to mention it makes you sweat, which gives a large surface area, your skin, that toxins can leave the body through. If you don't have access to the sauna, exercising in heat, whether it's your sweatsuit or just in the sun, can do the trick as well. You just need to sweat. Let me get back to my comments about marijuana and coca leaf tea first. As I mentioned, every plant has its protection as well as its treasures. In the case of marijuana, the burning of it changes its chemical composition to something very harmful for the brain, and its beneficial elements turn into poison. Also, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, and sometimes the same thing that can cure a problem can cause it if you don't have it. Arnica montana is another mountain herb used for centuries for muscle pain and bruises. It also is an anti-inflammatory. However, if used for too long, or when one doesn't have either problem, it can paradoxically cause it. In some studies, participants who used arnica had slightly fewer negative effects than the participants using topical NSAIDs. What some of the Cleveland Clinic, what is it and how to use it article talks about, and I'll leave the link below, is that you might as well just use the NSAIDs because other studies found the exact opposite. But NSAIDs come with some serious risks and side effects. They actually interrupt the channels that your body uses to do other processes, whereas arnica doesn't. So really take a look at these studies that say something, an herb, something natural that you can get over the counter versus, and for, way less issues. Like arnica has, okay, if you're allergic to chamomile or if you're allergic to daisies, you'll be allergic to arnica. But other than that, it's so funny because it's so well known that in the novellas for Spanish language TV, I remember seeing somebody's grandma on the show say, go get me the arnica when somebody had a bump, little kid had a bump. It's amazing stuff. We've got other things like nettle leaf tea for seasonal allergies. It's been shown, along with alfalfa and goldenrod, to be on par with taking allergy medication. You can drink this 3 times a day as a tea and combat hay fever and seasonal allergies, provided, of course, you're not allergic to it. However, nettle itself is actually stinging nettle and somewhat of a poison if you don't have the problem. The same thing applies to medication, so it's really nothing different. Got hibiscus tea if you've ever had any blood pressure issues. I know that my son's father had he went into the doctor's office with over 200 in blood pressure, and he was given these sample pills to take, and these things had serious side effects. And he was like, I'm not going to take that. So I read up on hibiscus tea, and we gave him, like, cooked up a whole vat. I have a little tree of it out on my patio. And when the flowers drop off, I just save them and put the oven on 200 and dry them. I just kind of leave the oven on until they're looking a little bit dried up and feeling a little crunchy. And then I make them in a tea, and it will lower your blood pressure. It sure did for my ex-husband. He drank that like every day, regularly. I usually 3 is my sort of magic number. You can determine what yours is, but that seems to be breakfast, lunch, and dinner, something that people can easily do and something that tends to work. That lowered his blood pressure. After a month of drinking it, he was perfectly fine. He didn't have to drink it anymore, and his blood pressure was back to normal. It is a diuretic, so you want to make sure, you're drinking the tea anyway, so you are getting some fluid in you, but you want to make sure that there's no other contraindications with a diuretic. Hawthorn berry is also good for blood pressure and cholesterol. I have a number of clients that have been put on statins because their cholesterol is high, but the problem is their triglycerides are just fine. So when your triglycerides are fine, you don't need a statin. All that means is that you have some kind of inflammation in your body, and the liver produces the majority of your cholesterol, about to the tune of 75%. So trying to lower your cholesterol when your triglycerides are fine is not going to help you. You got to determine what's causing the inflammation. At any rate, another incredible herb I came across when trying to help my son, because he had an active measles infection from even like the Franken measles, the vaccine strain of it. It's an herb called Kajanus kajan. I researched it on PubMed, and it said a hot water tincture or a hot water extraction was the best thing to kill the measles. Basically, and it was exposed to UV ray lights, which is basically sun tea. So I made this measles killing sun tea. Kajanus kajan is also known as pigeon pea. It grows everywhere in Nigeria and most of Latin America, especially Central America. Puerto Rico, they love their gandules, the pigeon pea, and it grows everywhere there. That is one of the most potent measles killers, according to PubMed. I used it, and his active measles infection went away after giving it to him, again, my 3 times a day number, for about a year, because it had become a chronic infection. He was infected ever since he got the vaccine, which was like 2 years in. I think he got it when he was a year old, and then about 3.5. So he had it about for 2.5 years. Have it swelling his brain, and then I gave him that for a year, and his titers went back down to where he had the antibodies only present. It wasn't indicating an active infection. Speaking of plants and different kinds of teas, we also can't neglect the herbs and spices that we use in cooking. I think now that we're in the Western diet, we don't use herbs as much as we should. At least they're dry. They're not usually fresh. Everything is built for convenience. But fresh is always going to be your best bet. So if you can get like a little herb garden started, or just have some fresh, they have them where you can refrigerate it if you're making meals. But if you look into the benefits of the different herbs, and one herb is not going to be right for everyone. Some people don't like curry. Some people don't like garlic. I have a friend that's allergic to garlic. So one size doesn't fit all. Keep that in mind. But rosemary is great for thyroid issues. So using fresh rosemary in your food, if you're not the kind of person that likes to take supplements, you can go ahead and do that. I use garlic as my full spectrum antimicrobial. So anytime we're sick, a clove of garlic gets crushed into either the palm of my hand and thrown down my gullet with a glass of water, or mixed in my food. I don't cook it because that starts to destroy the allicin that's in it, which is the compound that is actively killing bacteria, viruses, or funguses. And I try to do that again 3 times a day, kind of like as if it were an antibiotic. That has been what Holden takes. He has not taken an antibiotic since we found out he had autism, and that was over 12 years ago, because of the yeast in his gut that was overgrown and that we needed to get control of. So using an antibiotic was not an option. So we've gotten everything from an ear infection to 104-degree fevers dealt with just garlic. It's pretty amazing stuff. Even strep throat, if you chew it up and put it back there in your throat, it can kill that. Curry, if you have anemia, it has very high iron content. There's even some supplements that are iron supplements created with curry. So you have all of these herbs that have incredible healing powers. And we used to be a lot better about having these fresh herbs in our foods all the time, but we just don't do it anymore. The same thing with digestive aids, things like ginger. There's a golden milk tea, so you've got turmeric in there for inflammation with ginger. That's a good anti-inflammatory. Pepper, along with it, will help the turmeric work better. And then you can add things for flavor like cinnamon. Cinnamon is actually really good for blood sugar issues. And oregano is an excellent antimicrobial too, antibacterial mostly. And then we can't talk about herbs and spices without talking about essential oils. These things, although they seem like a drop in the bucket, they actually can be very effective, especially when you start layering all these things on, right? One essential oil is not going to kill what you've got going on. If you've got something complex, it's not going to restore your vitamin and mineral levels, but it can do certain things and activate pathways in your body and hormonal cascades that are truly surprising. I had a friend over that had a migraine, and I don't have any drugs on hand. So I think the thing I have on hand is like Benadryl. I think that's the only thing I have on hand because I don't want someone to go in anaphylactic shock. And I think maybe I might have an ibuprofen just in case. But I had nothing that would help her necessarily with a migraine, except I had lavender oil. So I put it on a cotton ball and I gave it to her to sniff. She just kind of held it there for about 30 minutes. And she's like, oh my God, my migraine is gone. So she couldn't believe it. But there's other things like thieves oil. During COVID, I got a bunch of thieves oil. It's if you look up thieves oil, you can make it yourself. It's like lemon oil, clove oil. I'm trying to remember eucalyptus, like a lot of different oils together in a blend. And it is excellent for killing microbes. And that's why they called, the thieves would use it, because they had a lot of things that they obviously stole that probably crossed many hands and were probably not living in the cleanest conditions. So they would use this oil to keep microbial infections at bay. Also, frankincense and myrrh isn't just for baby Jesus. The myrrh is actually an excellent gum antiseptic and general antiseptic. It has tons of uses, but it's excellent for mucous membranes. And frankincense is also an antimicrobial. They both are. But frankincense can actually kill skin cancer. It's amazing. I tried it. Well, what it does is help reverse radiation damage. I actually bought a 5G phone, and I'm not going to get into 5G, and that's another video for another time. But I got a 5G phone, and I had been holding it in my left hand a lot. I kind of knew I needed protection, but I didn't pay much attention, thinking it was only a little bit and probably not going to be a problem. Well, I go out in the sun, and sure enough, on that left hand that I've been carrying that phone, and I kind of felt something in my wrist, like it was a little pain, like swelling. And then I look at my left hand, and it's covered in like age spots, and I'm horrified. I wish I still had that picture. Nevertheless, I knew about frankincense, so I bought one of those, Faraday pack material gloves to use with my phone, and which works really well. I haven't had the problem since I've been using it. And I put frankincense oil on my hands every day. I can't even remember. I think it took like a week or two, and it took the spots away. So it's really incredible for skin damage. Highly recommend it. Another barbecue story I have is about the wonders of aloe. Aloe vera, as you all know, great for sunburns. I'm sure you know. If you don't, now you do. But it's also incredible for actual burns, like fire burns. My son's father was barbecuing one day and at a gas barbecue, and a flame came out and just kind of licked his whole right side, right up his arm and right up his right eyebrow and eyelashes and hair. Thankfully, he didn't have any hair except, well, it was a little bit like buzz cut shaved. So there wasn't much to burn off, or that could have been a real problem. But it hurt. And he got it was a first degree burn, but it hurt him. So we called my sister, who's a medical doctor, and asked what we could take. And she actually prescribed Silvadine, which is a drug. Again, my ex is very paranoid, which is, I guess, a good thing. I've started to do this more and more. And I wasn't, I didn't have a problem with him checking. And the side effects were just so terrible that we had a huge aloe plant. So he's like, no, I don't want to use that. And then I thought, why don't we use the aloe? So we did. We started using it on his skin and everywhere he got burned. And it was incredible. It like through days later, he was fine. And even during the process, it was very healing and helpful for him. I think we did get the Silvadine, and it was just like, compared to the aloe was even more cooling for him. So we went with that, and it worked like a charm. So guys, I want to emphasize that this holistic approach to health with natural remedies and just using everything that nature has to give to you is really powerful and great for your well-being, and things that, if done on all the edges, or if you layer all these things together, you're going to end up feeling better and having more of a robust type of health. So I wanted to, this time around, give you guys an opportunity to put what you do in the comments. I know you guys have a grandma or a mom or a dad who had some kind of great natural remedy that they shared with you or that they used all the time. I'd love to hear it in the comments. So if you'd like to discuss it more, if you have any questions on any of the topics covered in this video, please put it down there and I will respond to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for being part of this community, and please like and share and subscribe and put some of these things into practice. Bye-bye.